Greetings, salutations, all my fellow American sovereigns. This is the Vocational Science, Freedom, Saturday Night Civics and Sovereignty class. And tonight we will be continuing our reading from USA versus us.info. This is a website that I found a very long time ago. It's been up since the late 90s. But it has continued to grow and add information. And what it does is it shows the difference between what's de facto and what's dejure. And dejure means by right, and de facto means by fact, meaning that it's there, it's in existence, it's what's going on, but it's not legitimate. And the link to the site should be in the show notes for this class. So we left off at guarantees versus quarantines. Another way to look at this is the aspect of a guaranteed unalienable right protected by either state or federal constitutions. Then that's on the de jure side. And then on the de facto side, basically what you have is your civil rights or the things that they do that always trespass upon your substantive rights. So I'll start with guarantees. So first off, we have the Fourth Amendment. So the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, just a little rundown of the Fourth. The Fourth Amendment is basically your right to be left alone. And on the side of the road, or even just wandering around wherever, if some cop comes up to you and says, "Give me your ID," well, they don't have any right to ask anything of you unless they have what's called reasonable, articulate suspicion that you've actually committed a crime. And the short version of that is just RAS, R-A-S. So you can say to the cop, "What's your RAS?" And he should, or she should, know what that means. If they don't, then you've really run into a stupid one, or they're just playing stupid. But we all know that cop shops are literally not allowed to hire people over a particular IQ level. I know that might be shocking to some of you, but I promise you that is the case. So you're not dealing with the sharpest sticks in the bunch. Now, I would highly suggest that everyone carry a small pocket constitution with you. Now, if you're going to have contracts with the corporate state, well, yes, those contracts will most likely waive many of the protected rights that you have under the state and federal constitutions. And also, if you are a 14th Amendment citizen slave, then your status alone will not protect you and will literally only give you civil rights instead of protected rights that are unalienable. Okay, so then to break down the Fourth a little bit more. So the right of people to be secure in all of these various different things. So you have the right to be secure in your property. What's on you, what you own, your house, all of it. Basically, your entire gross estate. An estate is everything that a man or woman owns at law. That is your estate. And the word estate also is similar to, I wouldn't say exactly analogous to, but similar to an interest in something. So if you have an estate in something, it's a similar way of saying, I have an interest in this, right? So you have the right to be left alone. You have the right to privacy. No cop has any right to just run up on you and say, "Give me your papers," or "Empty your pockets," or "Put up your hands," or whatever. There's no right that they have to do that, because cops don't have, or sheriffs, or even U.S. Marshals for that matter, do not have any more right to arrest anyone than you do. They have the exact same common law right to arrest as we do. Because if you see someone causing damage, harm, loss, or injury to someone else, or say you see someone breaking into your neighbor's window, you have the right to arrest them, but then you have a duty to take them before the nearest and most accessible magistrate to explain why you took their liberty. And it's always a good idea to have a witness with you. Now, if you have a videotape, okay, all the better. But you have to have reason to arrest. So the cop has to have the same reasoning. So if he has no raz and can't explain why on earth he feels the need to demand from you the production of some contract with the corporate state, well, then he doesn't have it. And he can't force you to give it. In fact, one of the things that I say, if a cop ever comes up to me and starts to pester me about contracts and whatever else, I simply say, I don't have any contracts with the corporate state. What business do you have with me? Because if you follow it up with, what business do you have with me? Then you're kind of poking a jest at the cop, telling him that you're well aware that all of this is commercial, that all crimes are commercial, and you've cut off the capacity for him to deny you any rights based upon some contract that you might have with the corporate state. Okay. And then the second part of the Fourth Amendment. Okay. So supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Okay. Oath or affirmation. You have to, or the cop has to, take an oath or affirmation that they saw you do XYZ, or somebody else has to do the same. The cop just can't arrest you and then throw you in jail, which, by the way, is punishment before proving of guilt or even proving of probable cause, which is why they're supposed to have what's called a preliminary hearing to create said warrant of commitment to be able to throw you into jail. They are never supposed to just throw you into jail after an arrest. But every single one of them does it. But it is not following law. So the oath or affirmation, they have to swear that they saw you do XYZ. Now, if they didn't see you do anything, right? Say some guy comes running around the corner and comes yelling at, sees a cop around the corner and starts yelling at him and says, hey, there's somebody over there beating somebody up. And by the time the cop gets around the corner, the guy's just walking away, but there's some guy on the ground. Okay. Can that cop arrest the guy that's walking away? Technically, no. Now, the one who witnessed it could, if they wish to, but it didn't happen to them. It happened to somebody else. Now, the only time that changes is if it's actually like a felony. Say it's a murder, or say it's an armed robbery sort of thing. That's different. Then if somebody comes running around the corner and say, hey, that guy just shot that guy dead, and the guy's running away with a gun in his hand, and there's somebody bleeding on the ground, then yes, the cop or anybody else can arrest them based upon somebody else's testimony. But that's the only time you can do that. So the Fourth Amendment is this line in the sand that tells them, listen, you can't just go running around pretending like you have some sort of authority, grabbing up whoever the hell you want to and throwing cuffs on them and then throwing them in jail until some judge decides to wander into the courthouse 2 or 3 days later and figure all this out. That is not how this is supposed to go down. And there are certain states that even take care of this. For example, I know Chicago and New York, particularly New York City, they have what's called night court. And the reason they have night court is so that there's always a magistrate available to have a preliminary hearing regarding what the hell it was that just took place. Because again, it's unlawful to punish someone before probable cause is established and a warrant of commitment is created. Okay, so that's Fourth Amendment. So over to the de facto side now, the quarantines. So warrantless and unreasonable searches in homes, airports, corporate government facilities, on the roadway, highways, etc. Government may search and seize any, and I would say United States citizens, not Americans, papers and effects without probable cause to assist in so-called terror investigation. That's the Patriot Act. And, say, hey, ID, please. The ID called Real ID with biometrics is on the horizon and about to be implemented, if not implemented already. And we're not quite there yet. And I hope to God that never does happen. Okay, so that's the right to be private, the right to be left alone. That's that. Now back to the de jure for Fifth Amendment. And this isn't the totality of the Fifth Amendment. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to bring up the Bill of Rights and actually read it from the Bill of Rights. So we have the whole rest of it, because the whole rest of it is important. So no person shall be held to answer for a capital crime or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. That's 25 members of the peerage, folks. Not less. Can be more. But they cannot be United States citizens. They must be people. Except in cases arising on land or naval forces or in the militia. Land or naval forces and militia, that would be military tribunals. When in active service in time of war or public danger. Now, problem there. Or public danger. This is where you get into the problem of we're constantly living under an emergency since the Civil War. But I'll just leave that fact where it is. All right, semicolon. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. Meaning, once you try somebody for something and a jury says, nope, that's it, he's acquitted, he can never be tried for that same thing again. All right, then another semicolon. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, semicolon. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So, shall be compelled in a criminal case to be a witness against himself. Okay, that's another aspect of, oh, you want a contract from me, cop? Is that what you're looking for? Well, I know that deals with status. So technically, the demand for an identification is really just the demand for a contract. So in a sense, it would be a violation of your Fifth Amendment rights to give it up to him, because it's literally proving a different status than what you want to be maybe at that time. And that's fine, because as Bill Thornton and several others have said, you can be a citizen of the United States for certain things and not be a citizen of the United States for other things. And why is that? Because this is all contractual, right? So that's that. That's the fifth, the totality of the fifth. Okay, let's go back to the website. And then under this is a little snippet from good old Frederick Bastiat, a French economist, statesman, author, and philosopher who wrote the book called The Law in 1848. Now, if you'd like a full reading of that, it is on the Vocational Science of Freedom YouTube page. You simply go down to self-governance and then click one slide in over here, and it'll be right here. And the reading starts at about 17 minutes in, just so you know, so you don't have to bother to listen to the very boring introduction, who I think it was written by an attorney fairly recently. So anyway, just skip 17 minutes in, and you can start to listen to, and I highly suggest that everybody listen to, The Law by Frederick Bastiat, a very, very important book that explains a whole lot about what's going on right now, particularly with the law corrupted. All right, so, quote, "A man can live and satisfy his wants only by ceaseless labor, by the ceaseless application of his facilities to natural resources. This process is the origin of property," right? Makes sense. You mix your labor with the world, and what comes out of it is your property. But it is also true that a man may live and satisfy his wants by seizing and consuming the products of the labors of others. This process is the origin of plunder. Pretty much what the attorney does all day long. Also, pretty much what the Luciferian dark occultists do all day long in the form of banking and fractional reserves and pretty much the entire stock market and speculation in general, even though people have kind of gotten away from the idea that speculation on certain things is plunder, but nevertheless, it technically is. All right, to continue. The proper purpose of law is to use the power of its collective force to stop this fatal tendency to plunder instead of work. All the measures of the land should protect property and punish plunder. Thus, it is easy to understand how law, instead of checking injustice, becomes the invincible weapon of injustice. It is easy to understand why the law is used by the legislature to destroy in varying degrees among the rest of the people their personal independence by slavery, their liberty by oppression, and their property by plunder. This is done for the benefit of the person who makes the law, the attorney, and in proportion to the power he holds. So, the law, when it's used for plunder itself, is always an evil. And that's pretty much what we have seen happen, even right from the beginning of this nation. I could get into various different acts, but the point is that when you give people power, they tend to get corrupted. So you always have to, as Jefferson said, chain them down with the Constitution. And if you fail to do that, or if you fail to convene grand juries from time to time and start hanging people in the town square for things like, murder and common law theft and any other form of plunder, then the criminals get it into their idea that, well, I guess I'm just going to be able to get away with this. And then if a bunch of criminals get together and continually do it, say like Congress, or yes, child rape, child trafficking, well, then their power grows because people's apathy grows. So, all right, that was the de jure. Now onto the de facto side. Okay, so property is constantly, currently, and consistently being taken for alleged taxes without due process and without just compensation. True. Land and property is now being taken by eminent domain for purposes not originally intended. True. All kinds of fees and penalties are being extorted from the people for so-called laws. Right. Really, statutes, acts, ordinances, and codes that you end up binding yourself into by contract. The people can no longer win in court against the corporate government system. If one tries, he may be held in contempt of court and fined. Or, as I said, I believe last class, we got into the fact that you might end up like Ezra Pound, and they might throw you in the loony bin for a while. Simply because powerful people, or I should say, those who have presumed power, let's put it that way, have gotten so used to that power that they think that they are untouchable. I can think of a few judges lately that have been doing some very stupid shit that have been arrested for it. That's kind of my case in point. They literally think they're untouchable. Well, when we the people don't get together and, hang them every once in a while for things like treason, they think this is the norm. And they're even taught that it's the norm. Oh, don't worry, we'll protect you. Oh, don't worry, you're one of us. Right? Well, that attitude just grows into insanity, which of course we've seen. Okay, to continue. Now this is Senate Report 93-549. I don't have a date for this, so forgive me. The Senate examined exactly what powers they had granted the president when amending the Trading with the Enemy Act on March 9th, 1933. They concluded that, quote, under these powers, the president may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, actually martial rule, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private industry, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all, and I will say United States citizens. The Trading with the Enemy Act that they're speaking of March 9th, 1933, which is just the beginning of a ridiculously long list of fuckery that happened in 33. But just to keep in point with the Trading with the Enemies thing and seeing citizens of the United States as enemy combatants. Well, all that really started all the way back in the Civil War with the Lieber Code and Lincoln originally putting the Republic into a state of martial law. And it really hasn't ever subsided since then, which is the exact reason why every president since Lincoln has had to continue the quote unquote emergency, so that these quote unquote emergency powers can somehow magically, lawfully continue. But as we all know, it's complete bullshit. Okay. On the other side, de jure, let's get to Amendment B6. Quote, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right of a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Close quote. Does not say attorney. True. And there have been several court cases that state that your right to counsel is not the same thing as having to have an attorney appointed to you. So that's your assistance of counsel side. Now, the most interesting thing that I always find about the 6 is that to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. That's where you can really beat the shit out of these inferior courts, because if the inferior private for-profit courts and the judge, or special administrator, let's actually call him what he is, fails to tell you the actual nature and cause of the accusation, right? You say, okay, what is this? Is it criminal? Is it civil? Is it quasi-criminal? What jurisdiction are we in? Are we in common law? Is this equity? Is this a maritime amnesty court? Is this a law merchant court? What are we doing here? And keep pounding on the fact that, Your Honor, I demand to know the nature and cause of the accusation as per the 6th Amendment. Failure to do so voids the validity of this court, which it does. Because if no one can tell you, you can't defend against something you don't know what it is, which is the exact reason why that was written the way it was. So, know that. And yes, if you join the Vocational Science of Freedom, we do have motion templates that particularly deal with that issue. Okay. De facto side, government may jail Americans indefinitely without trial. Patriot Act. So-called government may monitor federal prison jailhouses, conversations between attorneys and clients, and deny counsel to Americans accused of crimes. Again, every single time that they use American on the de facto side, just simply replace it with United States citizen. Fascism, police state tactics and methods similar to Nazi Germany. Well, that's debatable. And then this next one is Jones versus Temer, or Temer, depending on how you pronounce that. 1993 case. Quote, the privileges and immunities, and this is a really important case, by the way. The privileges and immunities clause of the 14th Amendment protects very few rights, because it neither incorporates any of the Bill of Rights nor protects all rights of individual citizens. That's the slaughterhouse cases that are all the way back to 1873. Instead, this provision protects only those rights particular to being a citizen of the federal government. Right? It does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship. That's the difference. Those are your two different forms of citizenship. And I highly suggest that if you've never heard about any of this, that you go and you check out the citizenship aspects of the classes that I have under Reclaim Your State and Sovereignty on the Vocational Science Freedom YouTube page. They'll be a little bit into the playlist, but it'll be under sovereignty and then status terms, who you are and who you are not. And if you want even more aspects of status, you can go to either Rumble or Odyssey and also find the playlist therein regarding citizenship. Because I've done many, many classes on the difference between those two. And again, you can find them in the status correction classes on Odyssey and then also on Rumble. I believe it's in the same playlist. Okay, so to get back to USA versus US, now we're down to here. So that's the difference between the very important difference to understand that there is two different kinds of citizenship. Okay. You are either a de jure state citizen. Also, you can state it like this, that you are one of the people of the several states of the American Union, or you can be a 14th Amendment citizen, which is a federal government citizen that has no unalienable rights, but only has civil rights, meaning those rights that government wishes to grant you. Better stated as privileges, really. And then, of course, that gets into the different kinds of states that there are, which is the next section. So, de jure state, when used by itself, refers to the republics of the United States of America. All of the states are republics. Each state is a sovereign nation unto itself, free and independent. So you have California Republic, California State, or just California, abbreviated CALIF, not just CA in capital letters. This next section is written by Dick Carver, 9 County Commissioner, member of the Nevada State Land Use Planning Advisory Council. Okay. This is fairly lengthy. Let me see if this is what they're referring to here. All right. It gets into the kind of the beginning of the republics. Okay. So the book Golden Fleece in Nevada, written by Judge Cecil Georgetta, states, quote, in 1780, the Continental Congress adopted a resolution requesting the 13 original states to surrender to the central government, the Confederation, all the lands they claimed in the territory west of their original boundaries. That'd be west of the Appalachian Mountains, to the Mississippi. So such lands could be sold to private interests for money to pay off debt incurred by the Revolutionary War. And then the area would be divided into new states to be admitted into the Confederation on the same basis as the original states. Close quote. Judge continues, the 13 independent sovereign states were first joined together in a federal union known as the Confederation, and in 1781 ratified the Articles of Confederation in perpetual union. Those articles contain the following words. Article 2, each state retains its sovereignty, freedom and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this Confederation expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled, right? And then Article 9 provides that also that no state shall be deprived of territory for the benefit of the United States. There can be no doubt that the purpose of guaranteeing each state its complete sovereignty was to waylay all fear of joining the organization. It was those words of guarantee in the articles that the various states joined the Confederation in order to form a central government to perform certain functions for all the states as a group. It was to be a central government with very limited power. True. If you read the Articles of Confederation, which I highly suggest everybody do, they're a fairly short read, you'll find some very interesting things within. Not the least bit of is the original 13th Amendment, which states that no one who holds any oath or fealty to a foreign prince or principality can hold office in the United States of America. That includes every single esquire out here. None of them are supposed to be able to hold any office in the United States of America. Hence the reason why they don't. They hold offices with a corporation. All right, last little section here on the de jure side. This is from Jack Slefkoff. I am neither a resident nor a non-resident, neither in this state nor within this state, and certainly not a United States citizen. If I am to be categorized or described, one can consider me a living soul in a flesh and blood man, on the land, a free inhabitant, a California native. You could also otherwise say, you are a native Californian, or you are a native Texan, or you are one of the people of California, or you are one of the people of Texas. That's also fine. You don't have to get into all the rest of the things that he just said there. Free inhabitant's not bad, but it doesn't really convey your sovereignty. All right. And then on the de facto side, all states or corporations incorporated with the federal government, e.g. State of California, Corporate California, California State, State of California, and the abbreviation is capital C, capital A. And then the politicians and legislature of each state formed a new so-called government, de facto, and incorporated it into the corporate United States Commercial Corporation, aka United States Incorporated. And for anybody that doesn't know, that's 28 USC 3002 15A. Go look it up. The United States is a corporation and are therefore under its jurisdiction. This so-called government is actually a limited liability corporation. Limited Liability Act of 1851, chartered in a private military, international, commercial, maritime admiralty jurisdiction entitled State of Whatever, as evidenced by the alias. The change of the seal and the flag and the creation of a new constitution. Each state of, all caps, collects whole life insurance premiums known as taxes for the International Monetary Fund based inter alia upon the Limited Liability Act of 1851 and the bankruptcy of the United States of 1933. That's not all they do. There was a colleague of mine at one time who dug pretty deep into some Florida counties and found out that the counties of Florida are taking out life insurance policy, multiple millions of dollars thereof, on their residents. Yeah, that's not suspicious at all, is it? Once she found that information and started to bring it forward, magically her barn caught on fire at about 3:30 in the morning, and her barn is connected to her house. So somebody tried to kill her. This is not the only colleague / mentor of mine that has been either attempted to be killed or has been killed. The very reason why I stay anonymous in teaching all of this. Next part. Quote, in this state, or quote, within this state, includes all federal areas lying within the exterior boundaries of the state. That's Revised Code of Washington, found at that link. And yes, that link does work because I clicked on it earlier today. And I'll just give a really quick little show of it just to prove to you guys that's what it says. Okay. Now, as far as the in this state problem, and by the way, every single state has something similar to this statute. It might not say it verbatim, but it's something close to it. Some other states say that the word in this state literally means the District of Columbia or a territory or property owned by the United States. Okay. And the citizens of the corporate states, federal areas are subjects and are called residents, derived from res, meaning a thing, and indent, meaning identify. Therefore, a resident is a thing identified. Sure. Non-resident means any person whose residence is outside, quote unquote, this state, and who is temporarily sojourning within this state. Now, I added a document into the show notes for the mega file, and it is a short read created by a few of the colleagues of mine from Iowa. And they created this document and they show within it many of the statutes that I was just referring to. Those ones that say what the definition of in this state is. I'm not going to get into it and open it up and read it because we got a lot to get through tonight. But if you guys want to look at it, I highly suggest you do so because it's a document that I also went through in some of those other classes that I referred to regarding the two different types of citizen. Because the citizen thing and the status is one thing. However, the in this state thing is a whole entirely different fucking animal. That deals with venue. If they don't have venue, they have nothing. Okay? So if they can't prove that you were ever in this state, which by the way is stated within all of the statutes, acts, ordinances, and codes that I know of, particularly the ones that deal with the rules of the road. Okay, you can't charge somebody with a law from France if you've never been to France. Get it? Kind of a problem. So you can file a motion to dismiss based upon lack of venue. Objection, Your Honor. The state has to prove that I was in the District of Columbia, or they have to prove that I'm a resident of the District of Columbia. And boy, wouldn't that be a fun thing for the attorneys to have to do, because I would really like to see how they'd wrap their head around that one. Oh, you consider me a resident of DC. Oh, okay. How's that? Oh, I have a social security number? Is that where you're going? What? Because my birth was registered? What is it? Please do tell. But of course, they're never going to do that. I would love them to do that because then we just axe it right at its very source and say, oh, that's the presumption you're using? Okay, great, wonderful. Let's take care of that one. But anyway, all right. So that was the de facto. So back to the de jure. So we the people created the states, the republics, and are sovereign over those states. Certain powers are granted, I should say vested, to the state, not by the state. A document made by the people to create a state purposely limits the powers granted to the state. Said document does not measure the rights of those governed, but is to assure those rights are not trampled upon, or better put, are not trespassed upon. So, likewise, we the people made the documents that created the government of the United States of America, and are therefore sovereign over the United States government as well. True. Particularly when you read aspects of what we just did regarding a grand jury. You see, the state, under the Republic, the state can never just grab you up and, indict you on their own volition. Sorry, it doesn't work like that. You can only be indicted by the people, by a 25-member grand jury of the peerage. And if it's not 25 members, and they try to put it through a quote-unquote de facto grand jury, you can simply bring up the fact that, objection, Your Honor, this is not a grand jury as per the definition of what a grand jury is, which comes from the Magna Carta. So, all right, to continue. Also, people from each individual state of the states united participated in the creation of the documents that created the government of the United States of America with limited power. The people from each state accepted and gave their approval with the conditions that each individual state give up only certain portions of their power on an equal basis, but retained all other rights and powers in the states and in the people. That would be the 9th and 10th Amendments. Thereby, the states and the people in each state retain their sovereignty over the government of the United States of America. The creator is over the created, not vice versa. True. And that's a maxim of law as well. All right. Left-hand side, de facto, all state governments today are corporations, not sovereign states. True. The corporate states were created by incorporation into the corporate federal United States as corporate entities appearing to be similar to and overlaying the republics so as not to rouse suspicion, right, which is basically what the Buck Act did with the zip codes. Likewise, the corporate states created political subdivisions of their corporate state, such as County of Fresno, all capital letters, being similar to Fresno County, but it is not. County of Moderna being similar to Moderna County, but it is not, etc. Okay. And then we talked about the CAFRs last time, so I'm not going to rehash that. But if you're listening to this entire series in order, which I highly suggest that everybody do, then you'll already know what this is and what it's dealing with. Okay, and then Section 666 of the Federal Social Security Code, which would be Title 42, preempts Idaho's Free Exercise of Religion Act and similar acts of other states. Section 666 appears to mandate that every state is to force everyone to identify within a Social Security number in order to obtain a professional license, occupational license, recreational license, driver's license, and or marriage license, in spite of one's religious beliefs based on Revelation chapter 13 of the Bible, which warns of the beast that requires every person to identify with a number in order to engage in a livelihood. The Bible clearly states that one is not to accept a number whereby one cannot buy or sell without it. Part of the reason I do not have any contracts with the corporate state. I consider all those contracts to be marks of the beast, if you will. Even though I'm a Taoist, I fully believe in what that says, and I have seen the unequivocal evidence of it and what's coming down the pipe with digital IDs, smart cities, and everything else that goes along with it. Okay? Get out. De jure side, indirect taxes versus direct. In some states, an indirect tax is implemented on certain specific items. Other states may not have an indirect tax, while others may have an indirect tax on all items sold by corporations, although direct taxes are unconstitutional. Well, not true. If you have a direct tax, it has to be apportioned, meaning it's direct, but everybody gets the benefit from it, right? If it's and then if it's indirect tax, that means like not everybody has to pay it. So an indirect tax would be, say, cigarette tax. People that don't smoke, don't use tobacco, okay, they don't get taxed. No big deal. And then the proceeds of that go to everyone else. Okay, fine. That's apportioned, right? So you can't have a direct unapportioned tax, which is precisely what the income tax really is. And Spectre said, what did SCOTUS say about 16th Amendment direct tax or no? I know there's been several different cases that SCOTUS has taken up regarding the 16th Amendment. I am not familiar with all of them. I would guess that at least some of those cases would have brought up the direct tax issue, but I'm not 100% sure. However, that being said, I think it is covered fairly extensively in the documentary Freedom to Fascism, which, if everybody would wait until tomorrow, I did reload that onto the VSOF YouTube page. And I'll also get it up on Rumble and Odyssey as well, because it's one of those older documentaries that goes through a lot of information regarding the 16th Amendment and the income tax and the fact that you don't have to pay it because you have no duty to pay it because you have no liability. There's nothing that forces you to pay it, as several IRS agents state as such within said documentary. Okay, so that's indirect versus direct. So de facto sales tax and sales permits. Only corporations are required to pay sales tax. The sales tax is what corporations are required to pay as creatures of the corporate government. But they got ordinary people volunteering to pay upfront sales tax on behalf directly. They also got other companies to collect sales tax up front, as well as by making a quote-unquote sales permit mandatory to enter corporate trade shows. A sales permit is a license and makes one obligated to collect taxes and to turn them over to the corporate government. Out of ignorance, most companies volunteer to obtain a license, even though it is voluntary. Most government people enforcing sales license assume every company is required to collect sales tax. This is what the majority believes. Right. And then next section, we have California state versus state of California, which we pretty much covered before, but this is just kind of a boilerplate for any and all states. It doesn't just have to do with California. And I would say one of the most, well, I was about to say most important, but let's put it this way. One of the most blatantly obvious aspects of the fact of what they've done is that the original state constitutions for each state are always going to be the strongest of all of the constitutions of whatever state you happen to be dealing with. Some of them have, I think, up to 5 different constitutions. Others just have a few, some have 3, and anywhere in between. But it's always the first one that you want to stand upon. And there's very good reason for that. I won't get into all of it because I'd have to sit here and talk about all the various different states, which I just simply don't have the time to do. However, it's very clear. And yeah, I kind of beat you to the punch, Spectre. So I'm going to skip this little part here, see if there's anything really interesting or anything that I should truly check here. Maxims of jurisprudence of this California Civil Code. Okay. He's got that on the de facto side for some reason, though. And Volume 9, Statutes at Large, page 452. And again, this is California. The people created the original state constitution to give the government limited powers and to act on behalf of and for the people. True. Another interesting thing about California Code, which I don't know if he has in here. I'm just going to skim this really quick. There's part of the California Code that says, and as I recall, I'm just remembering this from what Bill Thornton said, that, and I think it's under the government code, that states that the people of California do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies that serve them. Now, I always found that to be a fairly fascinating, enlightened bit of verbiage, particularly because it's in the California government code, which should basically be on this de facto side. And okay, well, here's the interesting thing. All right, so another way that you can kind of tell is the difference in the preambles. Okay, so the first California Constitution preamble: "We, the people of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, colon, in order to secure its blessings, do establish this Constitution." And then the second or third or whatever one this might be, the de facto one. Preamble. We the people of the state of California, notice people is capitalized, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, in order to secure and perpetuate its blessings, do establish this Constitution. Okay. So order is capitalized, people is capitalized, which in the beginning, in the dejure one, it wasn't. And then the only addition then it looks like is to secure and perpetuate its blessings. Well, that is always a problem with corporations because they continue their existence in perpetuity. And that's actually against the common law because I believe there's Westminster statutes that specifically go against that about things in perpetuity. And the reason that England had to do that was because there were so many people that were giving their lands to the church, to the Catholics, to the Pope, basically, to absolve them of their sins, whatever. That eventually the English kings were like, okay, enough of this. Like this thing that never dies, the church, is sucking up all of the land of England, and we're never going to get it back. So they said enough of that, and end of perpetuities, and also that was also dealt with in the Statute of Mortmain as well, which again I just suggest that everybody go check out and read. They're interesting reads, and it's all part of the history of law for us to get to where we are now. Okay, so on to debt. So on the de jure side, wouldn't it be nice to be completely out of debt, personally, and have a stash of gold and silver besides? Yes, it would, which is exactly where I'm at. I don't have any debt to anybody. So another aspect of the word debt means, and it stems from the same word, debt and duty come from the same word etymologically. So if you owe a debt, you owe a duty. And if you owe a duty to someone, you owe a debt. Same idea, okay? So Cicero said in 55 BC, the budget should be balanced. The treasury should be refilled. Public debt should be reduced. The arrogance of officialdom should be tempered and controlled. And the assistance to foreign lands should be curtailed. Wouldn't that be nice? Lest Rome become bankrupt. Sound familiar? People must again learn to work instead of living on public assistance. Take away everybody's EBT cards. Thank you very much. Then on the de facto side, this really gets into the totality of banking, which talked a little bit about before. But if you really want the full breakdown of banking and how that whole entire timeline came into existence, then go watch the banking timeline on the VSOF on Odyssey. It's in the playlists. Because in order to understand and see the totality of what's going on, you have to be able to see the entire matrix and history of banking, see the entire matrix in the history of law, and see the entire matrix in the history of nations, particularly England and America, and Rome, as Cicero just reminded us. And so I have a very long class, I think it's 8 hours, of the banking timeline, which I simply pulled from the original Vocational Science and Freedom timeline document, which covers all of what I just mentioned. So, Inspector's right. There should be a little biblical thing called Jubilees. And every 50, or is it 50? I think it's 75 years in the Bible. But I could be wrong. Debts are supposed to be absolved. Land is supposed to be returned. And I've always found it interesting that the Bible, going that far back, had this thing called a Jubilee. Why would they need to do that? Maybe because they were the same unscrupulous sons of bitches way back then that Jesus decided to beat the shit out of them in the temple, right? Filthy money changers. If the money changers didn't exist, why would there be a need for Jubilee? There wouldn't. Right? So I don't know when the human populace is going to wake up and say, okay, maybe we've had enough of this. But anyway. All right, first bankruptcy was in 1863. That was, again, as I said, that was when the Republic went bankrupt during the Civil War. In 1865, the total debt was $2,682,593 and some change. A portion was funded by 1040 bonds to not run less than 10 nor more than 40 years at an interest of 6%. Now, I don't know what the timeline on that would be. I don't know if they're talking about 65 or 63. Well, 65, I guess, would... Oh, yeah, that's right, because that's something Lincoln did. That's right. Okay. And then when government goes bankrupt, it loses its sovereignty. Well, the government never had sovereignty to begin with, so that's kind of an odd statement. Anyway, to continue. In 1933, the U.S. declared bankruptcy, as expressed in Roosevelt's executive orders 6073, 6102, 6111, and 6260. House Joint Resolution 192, Public Law 7310 of July 5th, 1933, which is also 31 U.S.C. 463, confirmed in Perry versus U.S. 1935, 294 U.S. 330-381, as well as in 31 United States Code U.S.C. 5112, 5119, Senate Report 93-59, and 12 U.S.C. 95A. Anybody doesn't believe the United States is bankrupt can go fuck themselves. You better wake the fuck up and go read something. Had some idiot trying to debate me the other night. Oh, there's no proof that the United States is bankrupt. Really? What are you, an attorney? For God's sakes. Takes you 2 seconds to go look half of that up. And it's all right here in your face. Now, if you didn't know that beforehand, I have no problem with nescience. Meaning those who simply do not know. But I'll be goddamned if I'll put up with anybody's fucking ignorance. Because ignorance is when you know something and you choose to ignore it. Or you're told something and you don't bother to go look it up. That I have absolutely no tolerance for. Nor should any of you, for that matter. All right, members of Congress are officially trustees in the bankruptcy of the United States and the reorganization. Given this fact, I would also suggest everybody go read the congressional record, particularly Trefficant's musings, and also Congressman Louis T. McFadden. And there's many talks about within the congressional record regarding the bankruptcy of the United States and what was going on at the time. So I don't want to hear it. All right, continue. On to taxation. Limits on taxation. This is on the de jure side. Direct taxes such as income taxes are unlawful. Indirect taxes such as excise tax and import duties are lawful. And the Constitution provides for imposts, excise, and duties to provide funds for running the government. That's kind of the whole point of what Trump's trying to do with tariffs. The whole entire federal government was always supposed to be funded with tariffs. Nothing more. Not government bonds, not income taxes, nothing. Just tariffs. And if it stayed within its bloody limits, it would probably have a balanced budget. So, and there's another thing in here, understanding jurisdiction. I did not click in this prior to class. Let's see what this is. Understanding jurisdiction, preface. Okay, let's see who actually wrote this here. It's fairly lengthy. Who wrote it? Okay, must just be the author of USA versus US then, I guess. Doesn't have an author otherwise. Understanding jurisdiction. In all of history, there have been only one successful protest against an income tax. It all revolves around the word jurisdiction, and we need to go back about 400 years to discover this success. The word jurisdiction was still understood at that time. It means oath spoken. Juris, in the original Latin meaning, is oath. Diction, meaning spoken. True. Let me see if I can try and kind of get to the point here. Okay, I guess he's getting at the fact that it says in the Bible that it's against swearing oaths. I don't know how exactly that has to do with taxation, however, but okay, and it gets into the Quakers, yeah, because they definitely don't take oaths. Okay, this is a fairly long article. I can't seem to find the point that he's getting at, so I will just skip it. You guys can read it if you want to. I'm not exactly sure what it's getting at, but it has to do with taxation somehow or another. Okay, and then Thomas Paine said, taxes are not raised to carry on wars. Wars are raised to carry on taxes. Good point. All right, and then on the de facto side, no limit on taxation. Income taxes are legal when properly applied and are ever increasing, right? Other taxations such as inheritance tax are legal when properly applied, Well, I disagree with that because everyone has the right to their estate without fine and without fee once they come of full age. That's the Magna Carta. So based on that, technically all inheritance tax is unlawful under the common law. All right, IRS's 1040 forms originated in the 1040 bonds used in funding Lincoln's War. Okay, I'd like to see proof of that, but that's kind of an interesting connection. 1863, year of income tax was never used to history of the United States. The taxes were collected to help finance the Civil War. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, and then the IRS is a collection arm of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was created by the Bank of England in 1913. Well, created by those international Luciferian Jews who ran the Bank of England. That I would tend to agree with. It wasn't created by the Bank of England, but anyway. And is owned by its foreign investor. True. All right. The IRS is not listed as a government agency like all of the government agencies. Right, because it's a private corporation that has its charter out of Puerto Rico. The IRS does not have franking privileges. The IRS does not have franking privilege. I don't know what he's getting at. The IRS has to pay for postage. Oh, that. Oh. Okay, so he's proving it's not a governmental entity because they have to pay for postage. All right, got it. United States government attorneys deny Internal Revenue Service is agency of United States government. Well, right. It's because, and that's the reason why you can't use a FOIA request against them. But if you do want to have your IRS master file, which I highly suggest everybody get, they do have forms for that. Because all the IRS is a glorified accounting firm for the administration of abandoned infant estates. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. That's all it ever will be. To continue. All individual income tax revenues are gone before one nickel is spent on services taxpayers expect from government. Ronald Reagan. True. Okay, then there's some internal laws here, some stuff about IRS agent Sherry Peel Jackson. I think she's one that was actually interviewed. Yeah, both of these people, Sherry Peel Jackson and Joe Bannister, and I think John Turner as well, maybe. They were all featured in the documentary America, Freedom to Fascism regarding the IRS and the income tax. So, okay. All right. President Ronald Reagan, May 1983, quote, "Our federal tax system is, in short, utterly impossible, utterly unjust, and completely counterproductive. It reeks with injustice and is fundamentally un-American. It has earned a rebellion, and it's time we rebelled." Well, that's a good point and well said. All right. Next section. I think I'll finish off this section for the night. Benefits versus benefits. Well, I would say, yeah, you should never take a benefit from government. The second you start taking a benefit from government, again, you get into the debt and the duty problem. Okay. So, and furthermore, if your estate is being administered by someone, doesn't matter, and you go to them and you say, "Hey, I'd like a benefit from my estate." Well, there's a whole term for that in Latin. It's called beneficium abstinente. And it means if you're taking a benefit from your estate, you abstain from being the heir, meaning give me all of it. So basically, you're agreeing to your own administration of your own property, of your estate, because you're taking a benefit. Crazy as that sounds, there are maxims of equity around the understanding of beneficium abstinente is part and parcel of the problem. Okay. All right. So benefits. This is your side. Unlienable rights are not a lienable condition, meaning cannot be liened. In other words, cannot be infringed upon. Rights cannot be taken away or lost. True, but they can be waived, which is the problem, usually by contract. All right. Composes of God-given rights, substantial rights, fundamental rights, natural rights, and unalienable rights. And flesh and blood people have unalienable rights granted to them by their creator, which can never be sold, given away, or contracted away. Well, again, they can be waived by contract. Sorry, you don't quite have that completely right. Unalienable versus inalienable. I've never gotten into this argument, nor have I don't really think it has merit, so I'm not even going to bother with it. So right to enjoy is life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, full property ownership. As a wise man once said, the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is like apples, oranges, and alligators. They're not exactly analogous to each other. But anyway, basically the pursuit of happiness, the best way to really think about that is literally the right to your own free will. That's really what it gets down to. That you have the right to your own free will. No one can take your will without your consent. If someone takes your will without your consent, they have trespassed upon your substantive rights. And if they do so bearing a weapon, then that's called aggravated kidnapping. And yes, you should file suit against cops for said things, particularly every single time that they take you to jail instead of taking you directly before the nearest and most accessible magistrate. If they don't, they are literally guilty of aggravated kidnapping. But to continue. All right, the master does not ask his servants or slaves for benefits. Good point. No U.S. benefits. Every living soul is responsible for themselves and has the option of helping others. True. Each living soul gives accordingly to help others in need and receives the credit or gives the credit to his maker and provider. No tax burdens or government debt obligations. Right. Now, the thing about that is, he was kind of talking about taxation at the end of that. Well, the whole idea about taxation being forced. So if you take from someone and then give it over here to somebody else, no matter how altruistic your intentions may be, that is still the definition of theft. I don't give a damn that you gave it to somebody else. You still took it from somebody without right. So, all right, de facto side, inalienable rights. Again, I don't really get into that sort of vernacular flippy-floppy there, but anyway, government-given rights, they are really privileges. Yes, this is what's known as civil rights, people, under Roman civil law. There's a huge difference between our common law and Roman civil law. Persons, legal fictions, well, no, persons are infants. Legal fictions, which can be an estate, a trust, a corporation, have only inalienable rights, which may be surrendered or transferred without the consent of one possessing such right. Again, they just have civil rights. That's the better way to say it. So-called benefits are as follows. Social Security, applying for and receiving a Social Security card makes one a member of the U.S. DC Communist Party. Well, that's just kind of a ha-ha. What it really makes you is federal personnel, because the definition of federal personnel in the United States Code is someone who has a deferred retirement program from the United States government. Anybody want to take a wild guess what your deferred retirement program from the United States government is? Yeah, that makes you federal personnel. And is eligible for benefits of the party membership. Oh, he's still goofing around with it. Okay. All right. Since one is eligible for benefits, 100% of one's earnings, wages, belongs to, I'll just say, the employer. And the employer determines what they will keep and how much they will get back. Right. That's because your estate is being administered. That's the reason. You don't get what daddy won't allow, basically. And then this next one is Railroad Retirement Board versus Alton Railroad, 1935 case. The Supreme Court ruled that Congress has no constitutional authority whatsoever to legislate for the social welfare of the worker. Let that one sink in. The result was that when Social Security was instituted, it had to be treated strictly as voluntary. Yeah, I don't think they're treating it as voluntary anymore. In fact, I think you'd be lucky if you were able to get a child out of the foundling hospital without A, signing a birth certificate contract, and B, setting up a Social Security number for them before they would let you take your property out of that particular hospitaler-run prison camp. All right. There is no law that requires one to get a Social Security card. Medicare, Medicaid, grants, disaster relief, food stamps, licenses and registration, permission, privileges only, no rights, experimentation on citizens without their consent. Enter everything that's gone on with said kill shots and everything else over the past several years. Which is going to get a lot worse, by the way. I could get into all the chemistry of how they're going to put your vaccines in your food. So if everybody doesn't take growing their own food deadly seriously, pun intended, you might end up with things within you that were never supposed to be there. Compliments of your global Luciferian cult. To continue, corporate government takes your money and gets credit for helping others. Politicians, in return, create much more programs to get more votes. Eventually, there is no more money to collect and give. Everyone becomes a taker, and there are no givers. The government then collapses within. That is why democracy never survives. True. I don't know who it was that said that democracy always fails because once 51% of the people realize that they can pay themselves out of the treasury, the system collapses. Or something there like. As a matter of law, anyone that participates or takes from the system is responsible for what is being done to us as Americans. That's a good point, and one you can't really get away from. Yes. And Aloha says, that's also why you don't have babies in the hospitals. Do a home birth. Find a midwife. Much better experience anyway. Because, all right, to get on that point also, aside from what else they won't let you do before you leave the foundling hospital, is they're probably not going to let you walk out of there with your property without it getting 5 or 6 shots in its arm and getting its eyes swabbed. And if it's a boy, getting its penis cut. Well, fuck all that. But to continue. The only way out of this system is to abstain from the system and expose it. Yes, the only true way out of this system is to get your vocational science of freedom status docs done, because only then are you rebutting all of the presumptions that they use against you in all of these various different contracts. You remove yourself from all the contracts and you get the fuck out, because Babylon is very close to slamming the gates shut. And when those gates close on the other side, you're not getting through 12 feet of concrete, which is my analogy of what this digital prison that's coming is going to be. You are either going to be out of the system and be a ghost, or you're going to be completely stuck within it. Particularly if you don't have the capacity of self-reliance. If you want to learn more about self-reliance, just go to the Vocational Science of Freedom and click on the self-reliance quadrant. Learn how to grow your own food, learn how to get your own power up, and learn where to go find how to do those things. There are several classes where I just talk about the books that you should have to do that. Okay? And then LB Bork says, we may want to refer to it as the Gandhi method. Right. So go get your salt out of your own ocean front. Thank you very much. Let's see. Okay, so records is kind of lengthy. I think we'll stop here for the night. Spectre said a couple years ago, some folks and I now live stream their home birth in a hot tub. There you go. Right. Yep. Yeah, make it. We live in the digital age, so go ahead and make a recording of it for posterity of the rest of your grandchildren. Say, hey, look, watch. You want to watch your grandfather being born? Here you go. Water birth. And no, that's not dangerous, because when the baby comes out, it's used to having liquid in its lungs anyway. So that's perfectly fine. Plus, it doesn't come out into something that's freezing cold and gets bombarded with a lot of loud noises. So, yeah. Home birth, water birth, good stuff. Again, get yourself a qualified midwife. Don't just try it on your own. That's not suggested. Okay, let me see if there was anything else hanging around in chat. Nerdy's hanging out with us on Rumble. Hey, Nerdy, good to see you. And see if there's anything else in Mega that you guys brought up. It's having government retirement accounts. Yeah, Spectre, that's right. That's definitely what the Social Security is, and it's definitely why they don't let you walk out of there without assigning a Social Security number to your registered child, which of course starts the whole entire process, which we got into within this reading, but we also got into it in the reading of the Zero Hedge article as well, which we did prior to this, which I also suggest that everybody watch. Both the Zero Hedge article and the USA versus US are both very good starting points for people to get a good foundation. As are the USA, the Republic is the house that no one lives in, and also then the master classes, ins and outs of court, totality of law, redemption of your estate, and how your estate is stolen by fraud at birth, because this is where it all starts. It starts at the hospital with that contract. And on one last final note regarding the birth certificate contract, you won't be able to just walk into a hospital and get one. However, if you happen to know anybody that might be pregnant, have them go get one and then take a photocopy of it and then send it to me, because then we can have a whole fun class on what the hell is actually in there. Oh, Aloha's got one. Well, there you go. Haha. Yeah, send that to me. Let's do a class on it, because I would very much like to see, I think you're down south in Florida, right? Yeah. So I would really like to see if Florida has what I've seen in other states, which says on the top of the thing, if you do not fill this out, you will be fined $1,000, or it might be more by now. I have no idea. But I find that to be hilarious, because if you threaten somebody when it's a contract, then it automatically makes the contract null and void, because you can't enter into a contract under duress. Sorry, that voids the contract. So you just threatened me with fines if I don't sign this thing. Well, screw that. Yeah, inspector's got another point, which is UCC 1-308. 1-308 is the reservation of all rights. So if you sign the birth certificates, if they say you go in there and you do decide to go to the hospital, and they say, nope, we're not letting you leave until you have a birth certificate contract, well, then just make sure that you put on the signature line that you're signing it under duress and that you're signing it as per UCC 1-308. Okay? So reserve all your rights, even if you're forced to sign the fucking contract. Because then you can take it before anyone and say, hey, look, this was not valid to begin with. I cannot enter into a contract by duress, which is exactly what this was. And one final story on the severity of the birth certificates. There was someone who was helping a woman who was pregnant, and they were going to birthing classes, basically, right? Well, this particular someone was one of my students and was fairly knowledgeable in these matters. And when it got to the day when they were talking about, oh, and how you fill out the birth certificate, and la 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 la. Well, he decided to keep the head nurse, after class, and started asking her a bunch of questions about the birth certificate. And started to tell her things like, yeah, you do know that you're registering children, right, when this happens? And was talking for maybe about 3 or 5 minutes, something like that. All of a sudden, the fire alarm goes off in that wing. And the two of them just kept talking, whatever. And she's like, well, don't worry about the fire alarm. So I just probably pulled it or whatever. And he said, okay. And they kept on talking. And then about 2 seconds later, right after she said that, 2 or 3 cops poked their head into the room of which they were talking and started to glare rather menacingly at the particular gentleman. Don't think for one fucking second that every single room in every single hospital isn't wired. And trust me, it's wired straight to the masters. Because every hospital is run by the Knights Hospitallers as foundling hospitals, and a foundling is a child of unknown parentage, lost or abandoned. And the government wants to make sure that they keep scooping up the foundlings. So, with that, hope all of you had a wonderful time. Hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys take the time to spread the links. Hope you take the time to dig deeper. Watch the rest of the suggested classes. Also, make sure that you open up the mega file. Download the rest of the links that are there. The documents will be very enlightening as to what else you can learn from them. And if you'd like to join the Vocational Science of Freedom, you can do so by going to vocationalscienceoffreedom.org and going to our welcome package. Just download it, fill it out, and then you can set up your comms with us on our Revolt server and join us on Mega for classes. Okay, and until next time, I'll see you guys on Wednesday, VSOF members, for our roundtable. And the rest of you, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And as always, stay safe and stay sovereign.